Hello everyone, this is Dr. Purnima in week 2, module 2 of Postmodern Art and Literature, Theory and Practice. And today we are in the Postmodern Literature section of module 2. And in lecture 1, we are going to discuss postmodern critical theories. So when we discuss postmodern critical theories and their theorists, we understand their core characteristics. What are the core characteristics? So first is skepticism towards grand narratives. So what are grand narratives? We have already discussed in the previous lectures that grand narratives can be religious narratives, or they can be traditional narratives or oral narratives or folk narratives by which we want to seek answers to our everyday problems. So as if Ramayana is there, Mahabharata is there, or biblical stories are there. Their references and cross references had been there in all the texts that were written before postmodern era. But in postmodern era, the little narratives, the narratives that have been ignored, they become very important. So people are talking about what are the alternate voices, what are the multiplicity of voices, what are the pluralistic perspectives on this thing. So the grand narratives are questioned by the little narratives, and this comes from the theory of Lyotard. Then we come to fragmentation and decentralization. Why there is a lot of fragmentation in postmodern narratives is because postmodern narrative is also talking about the psyche that is fragmented. When we are discussing postmodern art and literature together, we know that literature also reflects, mirrors art of the time. So the fragmentation of art, which can be seen in Picasso's painting or which can be seen in other cubist painters, is reflected in the fiction of the time. And decentralization is there. This decentralization is also influenced by Foucault's theory of power, which is talking about knowledge is power, and how ideology and institution play an important role in various disciplines and how they influence the mind of the people, which in Edward Said's word would be the textual attitude. So the textual attitude is created through text, through institutions, through academia, through syllabi. So all these things are taken into consideration when we are analyzing a postmodern work of art or literature. Then we have already discussed earlier in earlier lectures that postmodern age is characterized by irony, because there are certain things we cannot say directly. So we satirize it. We make ironical representations on characters. Like Rushdie is a great master of that. When he creates a character like Salahuddin Chamcha, or when he creates, he's a mimic man, so he's the Chamcha. Or when he creates a character like Salim Sinai, who is self-reflective, and he is reflecting on himself, self-reflexive also, and he can see his own character very ironically. So these are some things that we see in the postmodern era very clearly. And then there is playfulness and pastiche. So a lot of things that are said in a very ironical tone, satirical tone, is also sometimes said in a very comical note. That's why this is an era of rise of comedy and rise of stand-up comedy, because people are very much anxious. So what is the replacement of anxiety? And I think sometimes this anxiety is replaced by very deliberate playfulness, and that leads to some kind of parody and also pastiche, because already what we are going to say has already been said in postmodern era. There are so many writers writing, there's no dearth of content, but what kind of content? So sometimes we start copying the content which are popular. This is also the thing that appears in pop art. There is a lot of parody and there's a lot of commercialization of art and literature, and that is leading to parody and unintentional copying of art and literature, that is leading to pastiche. Then we have also talked in several references earlier about hyperreality and simulation, like in Baudrillard's theory. So hyperreality is there, reality is often questioned. So the whole idea of reality is questioned, because we are living in the world of video games. We are living in the world of, okay, the games are also being reinvented, and artificial intelligence, and there are so many other devices that are coming up that are questioning our whole existence and our whole belief of reality. And this is not only about the new technologies, it is also about how we have started looking at physics and quantum physics, and we have looked at things with the Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty, or with Einstein's principle of relativity. So nothing is for sure, and nothing is always the way we perceive it. So the perceptions of things have changed, and that is this whole change of perception on science and technology and in art and literature has created a scene of hyper reality where reality itself is questioned, and that has led to magic realism, that has led to surrealism in art, dadaism in art, and magic realism in literature. Then we come to reader response theory and death of the author. That is also a very pertinent issue that comes up in postmodern age when we are looking about how we are questioning the authority of the author. And Roland Barthes is one of those critics who has thought about the French term, auteur. Auteur means a genius. So author was given a lot of importance before the postmodern age. So author had a certain authority, and the text was his work of creation. But with the advent of Roland Barthes, we start questioning that everything is not within the text, and it is more about how the text is read. And when the text, and it is also talking about reading the text without context. So the historical background, the sociological background, the personal history of the author, the biographical history of the author, all these things are no longer in question. So what the text itself is interpreted, and it is also leading to meaning of meanings or multiple meanings of the text. So a text can be interpreted in so many different ways from so many different perspectives, and all these things are very well discussed by Roland Barthes and other writers also when we understand who is an author, what is an author, how the term author came into existence, and how we then come to a very, very strong statement, death of the author. But death of the author is important for the birth of the reader. So reader becomes very important. Your interpretations of a text becomes very important. And that's why one work can be read from several perspectives. It can be questioned, it can be critiqued from several perspectives. All these things come into alignment with death of the author. Then it is a critique of capitalism. We have earlier also talked about Frederick Jameson's views of the cultural logic of late capitalism. And this cultural logic of late capitalism, because capitalism has already started in the modern age. And whenever we read postmodern age, we read it as a break from modernism or as a continuity of modernism. So in that way, capitalism stays. Capitalism is there to stay, and there is no alternative of capitalism. Socialism has failed itself, and there are other problems. So there is profiteering through capitalism, because warmongering is there, because who are profiting from the war? People who have a lot of money, who are investing in the arms and ammunitions, especially Americanocentrism is there, and America's whole GDP depends a lot on these artilleries and arms and ammunitions. So it became very pertinent for them that war should go on, because that would make these big business industries live and thrive through wars. So war, that's why anti-war novels that are critiquing war like Catch-22 have been written. And parody of war is being written, and there is all dystopic fictions are written, because what will we lead? Where will we go after World War III? If nuclear weapons are fired and new technologies are used for warfare, where are we leading ourselves into? So all these questions remain in the mind of a postmodern writer, and it influences postmodern fiction. So there is capitalism, profiteering, and warmongering, and then there is obscenity also. Sometimes it is done for salability of the text, because it is also any work that is created is a reflection on the age. So that age is full of things that are media sensationalized. So obscenity enters, and sometimes it is also because this is a market-driven economy and market-driven age. So how a book is sold, we are not calculating the worth of a book by its actual creative capability, but we are actually calculating the worth of a book by its salability, it's a bestseller or not, on how many million copies it has sold. So this marketability of a book also leads sometimes to obscenity and body fetishism in art and literature. And a lot is said and done for in the name of freedom and free speech, a lot of obscenity has been produced. Then when we talk about postmodernism and the theories, we talk about the theorists too. So Lyotard is one of the most important theorists who has talked about the postmodern condition, and he has talked about the age we are living in. And when we look around ourselves, how we define the age, how we look around us, and what we see in the age, that is reflected in the age. That's why anti-war novel, feminist novel, post-colonial novels are written, because after World War II, what is happening? Decolonization is happening throughout the globe. So till 1954, many of the countries have got their independence, and 1960 is the time that we consider the age of postmodernism. So postmodernism is slightly shifting from Americanocentrism, at least in thought process, to these third world countries or these post-colonial countries or these Commonwealth countries who have come into existence and who are talking about their narratives, who are talking about their history, who are talking about how they have been deprived and how they have been removed from mainstream history for such a long period of time, and what G.N. Devi calls in his book After Amnesia, because a whole generation of people have forgotten about their own cultural and oral history. So all these things come back and are reflected in the work of postmodern fiction. So post-colonialism also becomes one of the important themes that is there in postmodern fiction. So Foucault's discourse on power and knowledge that we have discussed, that is also very important, because knowledge is power, and how we exercise power. So who is creating knowledge and who is creating media, what media we are viewing, and how we are viewing it, because now we have also shifted from text to video realities. So it's more about the content that are being created. So it is also that who is creating the content is also creating the power structure. So a lot that is being said and a lot that is being represented in fiction or film or theater is also about who is producing it and from where the money is being invested. Because this is a money-driven society, so the investment is also very important. So who is investing? So the discourse will be created by who are rich. So discourse is always, and ideology is always created by the capitalist class and not by the working class. So Baudrillard called this whole new world that was coming, he looked at it as a world of hyper-reality and simulacra and simulation. So what is actually hyper-reality? We are living in the world of video games, we are living in the world of virtual realities. So this concept already started from Baudrillard. And he said that we are becoming far removed from our realities. And he quotes Plato that life itself is a shadow of a shadow. But in that also there are stages, and Baudrillard very clearly marked those 4 stages of change. And he said that simulacra and simulation are now, earlier people understood that this is the world of post-truth and reality has multiple perspectives. But now this virtual reality is created like a kind of addiction, that you are being forcefully removed from reality through sensations and sensationalism, through media and through video games and through virtual realities. So we are actually accepting an alternate kind of reality as our truth. And in the movies like Matrix, this has been clearly represented, that what we are is in our mind, and that is how we perceive the world. So the whole perception of the world around us is questioned, and the reality itself is being recreated in hyper-reality. And then there is this very important theory of Derrida's deconstruction. Derrida's deconstruction is very important because what we are doing, we are constructing and we are deconstructing. So meanings are created, but they are also deferred and deferred. So the difference, the theory that Derrida gave, talked about that we cannot ever reach to the meaning. Actually, meanings are always elusive. And that's why sometimes we also reach a sense of loss of meaning or aporia. So it was a post-structuralist approach. So structuralism also ends with modernism. So the concept that a sign and signifier and signified are related to each other, or there is a symbolic meaning of word, was also questioned, because meanings of word can change over cultural context, it can change over historical context, mean new words can be derived, new words, new nomenclatures can come up, and a word which was used in some context earlier may become redundant with the passing of time, and that's why meaning will also shift. So the shifting of meaning was also one of those things that was very representative of the postmodern era. Then again, we have already discussed a lot about death of the author, because this is very important. Why postmodern narratives have so many plots, so many perspectives, so many narrators. Sometimes there is unreliable narrator. All these fictional, what we can say, innovations are being done. Is actually being done because now the author is not important. The reader is important. So the plots are also left open-ended, like turn of the screw. So it is left on the imagination of the author that the protagonist was hallucinating, or she was actually the ghost, or she was actually seeing the ghost, or the ghost was real, or the ghost was unreal. So there's so many interpretations that come up, and that solely depends on the author. Not solely depends on the author, but on the reader. That becomes very important. Then we talk about Frederick Jameson's cultural logic of late capitalism. We have also discussed it earlier, and again we are discussing it because the era that we are living is the second part of capitalism. And this is only an intensified form of capitalism, where capitalism is transmogrifying itself, transforming itself into something greater. Now we cannot, at least in modern age, people were looking for an alternative of capitalism and socialism. But now there is no alternative. Capitalism is here to stay. And the people who are the entrepreneurs or who are the business class, they solely understand that they are irreplaceable. And a state capitalism is also developing. What is actually state capitalism? When you think that it is a democratic government and you have your right to vote and you have chosen the government, but actually the rich or the business class are so powerful that they can influence the decision made by the government. That is state capitalism. And now most of the capitalism that we see around us is state capitalism. Also, this is a time of monopolistic capitalism. So what is happening in monopolistic capitalism is that we feel that we have choices, but most of the companies, which are big companies or big media houses, they are all collaborating with each other, and they are not allowing smaller players to play in the market. So it has become about big players, and they will not allow the smaller players to thrive in the market. So this kind of monopolistic competition or monopolistic capitalism has become what you would say the norm of today's capitalism, and that is what Jameson is pointing out in late capitalism. Jameson has also pointed out in Andy Warhol's paintings or in other painters' painting that how it has become so capitalistic and how celebrity images are being painted. We look at a person as more than life, but what it is actually, their larger than life images are actually a brand. That is again linked to their saleability. So it is all about marketing and branding and selling, and no longer anything has any more significance. So the essence is lost, and people are becoming that's why this is an age of non-essentialism. This is an age of anti-foundationalism, because foundational structures are breaking itself, and that's why this is an age of deconstruction, because foundations are questioned, centers are shifting, marginalized people, marginalized voices are speaking for themselves. And that's why this is an age which has multiple kind of strands of literature coming together and merging into one large sea of literature. So when we come to the postmodern condition, Lyotard has talked about incredulity towards meta-narratives. We have discussed it earlier also, that meta-narratives are no longer the answers today. We cannot give answers to our lives by what already has existed, like the minor characters or the underrated characters. Stories are written about them, or stories are mythologies are being retold. So like a character like Circe or a character like Medusa, who have been painted as witches, who have been painted as kind of devils, they are actually the victims. And that's why they have, Medusa has the serpent head, or Circe turns into a man hater, or she turns men into pigs. So when we earlier used to read that story from a very dominant white male chauvinistic or white supremacist male supremacist attitude, so that is again being questioned by these alternate narratives. So alternate narratives are questioned. Then knowledge is performative. So knowledge being performative is also something very important, because knowledge is, till now we thought that knowledge is for knowledge's sake, but it is not like that. Knowledge itself has certain roles to play. Knowledge also controls our mind. So knowledge can be used for brainwashing. Knowledge can be used for manipulating. So how knowledge is being produced, who is producing the knowledge, who is the dominant group, that is also important. And that's why marginalized voices came out in the open and started questioning. Like Chimamanda Adichie says that I when I write, I'm always considered an African woman, like, but I am more than an African woman. And if you have to read my work, you should read it as other works of art are being read, for the things that it has to say, for its content, for how it is being written, for the style of narration. So all these things are often ignored when we are critiquing a work of a marginalized author, or a feminist author, or a black author, or a post-colonial author. This is also something that comes up in the postmodern times. So there is a shift from narrative knowledge to database driven knowledge. This is also very important, because the critics are talking about that now what happens, that texts are also turned into databases, into internet archives. So actually the books are becoming redundant. So we have also moved a step forward from the times of authorial position of the author, and we have also moved into a time where there is no dearth of content, but what kind of content is being created, that again is a question. So there is again a time of quantity over quality. So because it is a time of mass production and media production. So both these things, mass production and media production, what they are doing, they're increasing the amount of productivity, but they are not seeing the quality of production. So this is also something that is critiqued in the postmodern era, but this is also a basic truth of postmodern era. So again, we have discussed in great length Baudelaire's hyperreality, where he discusses realities versus simulations. So reality again is not linear, there's a non-linear narrative, because time and space is also questioned. And there is a procession and precession of simulacra. And the examples we can take is of Disneyland. So what happened in Disneyland? All these characters are make-believe characters. They don't exactly exist, but we start taking them to be real characters. He also gives example of Disney princesses. He said that when you say a person to draw a princess, they would actually draw a Disney princess. They would draw Cinderella maybe, but Cinderella was not exactly a princess. So instead of drawing a real life princess, what we make is a copy of a copy. And that is the kind of reality we are living in. It is also a time of reality TV. So the concept, like we have seen in reality TV, where everything is melodramatized, that has, because we want to capture reality in its essence, that is evading us, but it has also led to certain kinds of television shows that are reality TVs. Then we have again discussed Derrida's deconstruction, which talks about binary oppositions, and which also says that meaning is always deferred. So we actually never reach the sense of meaning. And then there is a critique of logocentrism. So the meaning, the symbolic meaning of word, or the language at the center, is again being questioned, because language itself cannot convey the meaning. So text itself cannot be. So the meaning of is somewhere outside the text. So text itself is not always fully comprehensive of the meaning that it is trying to convey. So there are critiques of postmodernism. So there are accusations of relativism. There is political inefficacy, because political inefficacy will be there. politics is there, and again we talked about state capitalism. We also talked about like what is the alternate kind of government that we have democracy, but there is also corruption. So postmodernism also highlights a lot of corruption that is happening. Then there is confusion, then there is obscurity, and there is legacy and continued influence, because there is this anxiety of influence is also there, that whatever is being said or done has already been said or done before. And then there is what is the relevance of it in the digital age. So in the digital age we see that everything is shifting and the movement is also shifting very fast, and then there are ongoing debates and new directions. So when we consider the new debates and new directions of postmodernism, we understand that we are, because it's a long phase and new technologies are coming up every day. It is also an age which is thought about techno thinking, but now again people are talking about moving to ecological thinking. So environmental dystopia or environmental dystopic fiction or science fiction also become the genre of this age. Why? Because this is an age where we know that technology cannot be the only solution. So we have to go back to the times when we have to preserve the environment around us. We have to preserve the world, and that about all the sustainable development and all these talks are coming up when we have to think about the world from environmental perspective. And then there are ongoing debates and there are new directions that are coming up. So for further reading, we can read Lyotard's The Postmodern Condition, Foucault's Discipline and Punish, because how discipline and punishment controls the society, and his also the like Big Brother is watching you, that came in Orwellian 1984, or how panopticons are used, and when surveillance is used, and when people are feeling that they are being viewed or they are being recorded, like in a panopticon in a prison, when you are under surveillance, when you are being watched, your whole attitude change. So that is something that comes from Foucault's Discipline and Punish. And we have already discussed about Foucault's Knowledge is Power. And then there is the concept of Baudrillard, simulacra and simulation, that we have discussed again and again, because when we see things through media eyes, we have not seen it in reality. So we depend on media representation. Like if a war is happening and we only see the bombings and we don't feel any emotional connect with the war scene. So this is also how we are distanced from reality. Or something. Another example would be like if a meat is being sold in a capitalistic setup, then a person doesn't see the meat being cut, so they don't feel any emotional connect with the animal, and they only see meat as a finished product. So that is also something, that is how we are removed from the reality by the capitalist order of things and marketing of things. Then, as Judith Butler has pointed in Gender Trouble, and gender is performative and gender is fluid, all these concepts are coming up, and a whole new criticism of feminism and LGBTQ comes up in the postmodern era. And then comes the seminal text of Gayatri Chakraborty, Spivak, Can the Subaltern Speak? So it is about the marginalized and subaltern perspective, and it is about the muted voices of subaltern people who have been remaining muted for such a long period of time. So that is another perspective that we get from Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak. So we come towards the end of this lecture, and the only thing that remains is about Foucault's Power and Discourse, and how knowledge and power, they are intertwined with each other, and how knowledge can also be very constructive, and it can be very deconstructive also, because who is creating knowledge. So a lot of work, when it was created by British writers and colonial writers, so when they were producing knowledge, it was their perspective that appeared in the text. This is what Edward Said is questioning in Orientalism, when he is telling that Orient is only represented through the eyes of the Occident, and so the labeling, the stereotype of the Orient is being done. And then the discursive formations of discourse happens through beliefs, ideas, texts. And then, of course, we have discussed how surveillance works and how biopolitics works, because again, carbon trading is an important concept that comes up. So the rich countries, they are not ready to reduce their pollution levels, so they tax the poorer countries, and they give the carbon trade with them, or for their production of carbon they pay amounts to them. And this is how they are not shifting their responsibility but only buying their responsibility. So that's all for today's lecture. In next lectures, we'll continue with how postmodern theories influence the postmodern fiction and literature in general. Thank you for today.